speaking, or we managed to be very time concise. I want to start by explaining that I'm going to be moderating this session, the third session of our Loop Symposium on exhibiting on behalf of Sabel Gavaldon, curator at MACBA, dear friend of Loop, and very beloved Barcelona art part of the art community, who we had invited exactly to be chairing this panel. Sabel had a passing in his family during the last days, and unfortunately he can't be with us, and I'm taking his reins, and you will have to see a little bit more of me, but I'm sorry for that. And so, first panel on exhibiting, following yesterday's discussions on commissioning and producing. So once we have a film, a video, an installation, that is how, when, why, how is it changing, the ways in which we're presenting. This is what we're going to be discussing today with these four wonderful panelists. As yesterday, I am not going to introduce their bios. You have them in the booklets. They're going to be speaking about what they do. So in a way, there will be a process of self-introduction. We're going to start with Julian Ross. Then we have Paolo Moretti, followed by Lisa Long. And last but not least, we have Andrea Lissoni. Thank you for being here with us, and I hope you enjoy, and then we have time for a little conversation. Thank you.
So, thank you everybody for being here. Thanks to Filipa and everybody at Loop, Emilio, everybody for the invitation. I really appreciate it. It's a real honor. My name is Julian Ross. I thought I'd start my presentation with two images. This one, and this one. These are photographs from the Flaherty seminar that I co-organized with May Aradol Ingavanij this past summer in Thai Film Archive, which is located in Salaya, Thailand. The Flaherty seminar has existed for 69 editions. Usually takes place in the US. And at this event, what's quite special about it is that all the participants, 200 people or so, follow the exact same program. There's no parallel programming for around 6 days. And there are screenings and discussions in the cinema, but also in smaller groups. Over the past 10 or 15 years, my practice has revolved around film, but also performance and installation. And this Flaherty seminar was really a moment for me to recommit to the cinema space, what it has to offer that's unique in this age where media proliferates everywhere. And I think also a relevant conversation for Loop to think about what can the cinema space offer versus other environments as well. So I hope some of that feeds into my discussion today. Our discussion today, excuse me. And this past, just 2 months ago, I joined the Filmmuseum in Amsterdam as a head of film programming. And so again, with this new role for me, I'm able to commit to the cinema space in the Filmmuseum. We have 4 screens there. For those of you who don't know, we're located in Amsterdam, the Netherlands. We're the National Film Museum. And I see what we do in kind of 3 pillars. One's our collection. It's a big film archive with 55,000 titles. Another is the exhibition space. We do 3 or 4 shows a year, film historical figure solo or contemporary artists working with moving image, and sometimes group shows around themes. And I want to acknowledge Jaap Guldemond, who might be here. He's somewhere here in this hotel, and Eva Langerak, who's also here, who is part of the exhibition team. So if you have any questions specifically about the exhibition, maybe you can ask Eva or Jaap. And then what we do in the cinema space, we have 4 screens, a rotating program from new releases, our Haus film seasons, but also a lot of artist film presentations also within the cinema space there. But I just joined 2 months ago, so it's a bit premature, I think, for me to speak of what I've done so far there. So what I'm doing today is presenting a bit on what I have been doing over the past few years, which I hope to feed into what I do at the Eye. I'm part of a group called Collaborative Cataloging Japan. I'm from Japan, so a lot of my research has revolved around Japanese artist film from the 60s onwards. And on CCJ, I work with Anadachi Tash, based in Philadelphia, and researcher Go Hirasawa, based in Tokyo. The three of us worked on a MoMA exhibition and mainly accompanying film program, Tokyo 1958 to 1970. It took place in 2012. And when we were researching, we faced a crisis, really, in Japan for artist film. Because in Japan, at least, the film archives thought of this kind of work as too art for them to treat. And then the museum collections weren't really dealing with it either because it was for them to film. So what we found was basically all the materials were in, the artists' homes, in their basements. And if you know Japan, in the summer, it's humid. It's not a good climate for film material, videos. And these artists were pretty elderly. Many have passed since. So we felt this sense of urgency, and we said, okay, let's try and map out where all these film and video objects are in the country, and do collection surveys to identify which works are in most need of urgent attention, then pull some funding together and do the preservation work, and then donate it to a film archive or a museum collection so it can be preserved. So that's the kind of work we did, and exhibition became part of the preservation project to introduce these works to new audiences and get them to enter a more kind of broader dialogue around artist film today and historicization of such kinds of practice internationally. So this summer we did this exhibition called Community of Images, which was presented at Philadelphia Art Alliance. And we focused on Japanese artists who were based in the United States in the 1960s and 70s. And these artists, their works were overlooked because they were both Japanese and American, so kind of both and neither, in the sense that they weren't part of either history. They're often collaborations between American and Japanese artists. And a lot of the works we looked at were expanded cinema, so performance-based works, sitting between performance and film, presented in discotheques, like Electric Circus, cinemas, gymnasiums, churches, these kind of environments, so not really part of the official lines of art history and film history. Yeah, and they were performances, so each time they were presented, they present a different iteration. So many challenges for us to think of in terms of preservation and representing them. And I think some of these questions, although these works are from 50 years ago, some of the questions we have to ask are relevant for artists today. I often ask the same questions to contemporary artists working today in this kind of realm of performance, video, film. Just try and imagine somebody 50 years from now, somebody like me coming up to you and asking all these questions, and what you could prepare for that in terms of documentation, what you could prepare for that in terms of answers to these questions. What's the essence of this performance versus what's a bit more flexible, depending on the space, the occasion, etc. So that's the exhibition we did. And I thought I'd share you one case study from that exhibition, show you a few slides of that. Shelter 999, presented between 66 and 68. This was a collaboration between Alvin Lucier, the sound artist, and Takahiko Imura, the filmmaker. Sometimes their partners, Akiko Imura and Mary Lucier, both respective artists, contributed to the performance and made a group called the Sparks. This work was presented in Electric Circus, the Discotheque, Filmmakers Cinematheque, the Blackgate Theater, so around New York, but also a church in Chicago, auditorium in Connecticut, also in Tokyo once. Every time it was presented differently. And what we found were various elements in both Tokyo and New York. We found it was a multi-projection performance, 16 millimeter carousel slide projectors, and live music by Alvin Lucier. And so what we found was the central projection with the instructions, with all these marker pens saying, this is not happening this time, this other thing is happening this time. We also found the film loops for the other projectors in Alvin Lucier's paper collection in New York Public Library, also with sound recordings. And we also found the slides that were used and photo documentation of the performances as well. And we put on display here. So what we did was digitize the film elements, make slide duplicates and use a carousel slide projector, and present the, in terms of audio, the sound recordings that were in Alvin Lucier's paper collection. And there were many, we had to present it, I think, importantly as an archival presentation, because each time it was presented differently. It was a performance originally, and now we're presenting it as a looped presentation, as an installation. And it's important to point out that parts of it's digital as well, partially due to costs, etc. But we're going to do a analog film version next summer in Germany. That's being planned. And in our research display, we really emphasize that this is one version out of multiple iterations that took place of this performance. And just to reiterate again, this kind of performative practice really just slips through the cracks often in discussing artist film. And I think, artists today still work in this realm between performance and video, film, etc. So we felt these questions that we were asking for these historical works remain important ones for artists today. Just scrolling through some other things that we presented. Yukisa Isobe and Judd Yalcott's Dream Reel, a multi-projection performance onto parachutes. So we were able to work with Isobe, who's still active today, use the original parachute and project Judd Yalcott's work onto it. And then we reconstructed Ko Nakajima's liquid projector with the assistance of Ko Nakajima, instructions, of Ko Nakajima, which we were able to present. It's like this 16 millimeter wrapped onto a light display with mirrors. That means it can project onto the walls, and it moves, as you see. That's all for my presentation. Although what I presented here is historical, I also work a lot with contemporary artist film, but primarily inviting them into the cinema space. So I think some of that will feed into our discussion later. Thanks for listening.
Hello, my name is Paolo Moretti. Thank you, Filipa. Thank you, Emilio and Loop, for the invitation, and you for being here. So my presentation is about a personal journey that hopefully will also speak about a bigger framework and the evolution of what we call today artist cinema. I'd say that the first kind of contact, I'm a classically trained cinephile, I would say. I come from kind of a tradition of big auteurs, retrospective, politique des auteurs, etc. And despite kind of having worked at the Pompidou Center in the early 2000s and went to Rotterdam Film Festival at the time, but was kind of really upfront on these kind of forms and artist cinema. I think that the first contact with a conceptualized idea of artist cinema was at FID Marseille. And there are some kind of actual and former employee of FID Marseille here today, which I salute and thank. FID Marseille was a festival kind of run by Jean-Pierre Rem at the time. That is an art historian and critic, and that brought his sensibility and knowledge about art history and contemporary art to a rather kind of classical French documentary film festival framework, provoking a sort of ideological clash and very fertile kind of clash that was not understood by everybody at the time, but ended up being very inspiring as an input. And I think that a lot of people kind of have wonderful memories of this garden at FID Marseille. I think that it was Hur yesterday that was saying that a lot happened through conversation, and I think that a lot of conversation that happened here brought to us wonderful artist film in the following years. These are some of the names that were screened there that we are familiar with now, but at the time they were not the usual names that you would find in a documentary film festival lineup. And this ended up kind of being incredibly inspiring for me, and I think for an entire generation of programmers. And the first opportunity that I have to put in practice these kind of inputs and ideas were at the Venice Film Festival, where I have the opportunity to work from 2008 to 2011 as the artistic director chief assistant, and throughout the conversation, especially about the short film presence in this bigger festival, we kind of wonder if something could be done, because at the time in this kind of Class A festival, the short film were considered more like show reels for soon-to-be or want-to-be directors of fiction features, and for me, kind of being familiar with FID Marseille and other places that were kind of championing artist cinema, I saw it as an opportunity of broadening the codes that were presented in this kind of big festival. And these are kind of some of the names that we managed to present throughout those kind of couple of years, because it was really 2010, 2011 that was this major kind of evolution in the Orizzonti sidebar. And starting from Gabriel, for example, that was one of the artists that we championed, but also yes, Julian Karani with Il Capo, that was basically the beginning of his international career, or Mati Diop presenting her first fiction short there, and many others. I mean, I really clearly remember the kind of very heartwarming feedback of the entire community that suddenly felt that these big kind of events were sensitive to their practice. These kind of some bonus images of Julian Karani with an always flamboyant Maurizio Cattelan, because again, a lot happened through conversation, and for example, this exposure in these big events attracted somewhat unusual attention on these kind of rather young authors, and Maurizio Cattelan started collaborating with Yuri and basically made possible, in a way, his following films, or a young Mati Diop, she's still young, but kind of it was one of the first experiences in a big event. She went on kind of winning awards in Cannes, or Gabriel and his co-director at the time, Daniel Schmidt, presenting wonderful Palacios de Pena. The next step was the Rome Film Festival, where I ended up working after Venice, and the artistic director at the time created this section called Cinemaxi that was happening at the Maxi Museum, in the auditorium of the Maxi Museum. It was the same concept, basically, kind of bringing artist cinema to kind of a bigger event. So it was happening at the Maxi, at the auditorium. This was the setup we thought about in the auditorium, just to know, and this is a curious thing about exhibiting artist cinema, the auditoriums of contemporary art museum are really bad for screening kind of cinema. So this was our setup, but actually the screen of the museum had the same ratio of, I guess, the ratio public audience and screen size as the same ratio of this TV screen compared to you, because it was like this, which for world premieres of a very important film is not ideal, I would say. And moreover, kind of the first year, because it's stylish, the walls were white. So we had to kind of darken the entire auditorium, because if not, you could read the newspaper during the screening for the reflection of the light. So these are some of the artists that we screened during the Rome years, including, for example, to be noticed, Luis Patiño, that I guess some of us know here. It was screening his first international kind of films, Montagna and Sombra, and he went on kind of to a wonderful career. Or Roy Rosen, of course. I think it was Leonardo that mentioned yesterday how important it is to work with artists throughout the years, and I guess that again, Gabriel, I think it's so it's but yes, kind of following the path and screening the work of authors and being faithful. I think it's also very important. And then we jump to Quinzaine des réalisateurs, Directors Fortnight, that I had the opportunity to direct for 4 years. I hope it doesn't feel too much like the run throughout the Louvre in Jean-Luc Godard band apart. This kind of, but I do my best. So these are. This was the venue. So it's in Cannes. It's a 800-seat venue, which for artist cinema you can imagine it's challenging. But nevertheless, I mean, so the fortnight has such a wonderful tradition in kind of championing kind of, I mean, properly artist cinema. My period of reference was the 70s, and Stan Brakhage screened film at the Directors Fortnight. So I was saying, so who's today's Stan Brakhage? So this was the question, and yes, we ended up kind of selecting a lot of artists. Here, for example, we can see Ali Cherry presenting his wonderful The Dam. I am very kind of happy and honored that we managed to provide him such a wonderful platform for his film, and yes, kind of provoking this meeting between these practices and a wider audience and a professional audience, which is most likely mostly not looking for that, but kind of injecting these codes in a rather more traditional oriented kind of forms of storytelling. For me, it was really meaningful, and by the way, I thought it was the mission of the platform I had to direct, and yes, here are some of the names that we screened throughout those years. Again, Gabriela Brantes. and I come to the latest project I'm taking care of at Fondazione Prada, Cinema Godard, and the studio program especially. So Fondazione Prada, for those who are not familiar, it's a big kind of contemporary art complex in the southeast of Milan, and the cinema is right here in the heart of the Fondazione. It's a wonderful design site designed by Rem Koolhaas studio. So these look like rendering, but they are not. I mean, it took me a while to get it. And this is the entrance of the cinema. It's a mirror-covered space, again, because I insist on the places, because well, for me are really a key part kind of seeing and watching and exhibiting artist cinema, because many artists actually I realized didn't actually had the opportunity to screen their film in a proper cinema in many cases, and I'm very happy to provide this opportunity to most. So this is the cinema. The interesting part is that it has folding walls which look like that when open. So it's again, it's not a rendering. It's the walls open up to create kind of a semi-open air space in the summer for kind of nice screening. So this is the venue, and these are some of the programs that we prepared, like Diego Marcon, Alberto Mielgo, Beatrice Gibson, And so basically, Fiona Tan, the idea is kind of to put together a rather anthological program followed by kind of an extensive talk. And for many films, we had to prepare the prints and the copy because they were not available for big screen. These are some of the names that we invited. But again, so these are kind of a small case study. Within the case study is Miranda July, because it started with an invitation to present her first retrospective. Curiously enough, nobody thought about a kind of complete retrospective of Miranda's work. So I invited her, but suddenly kind of we involved also the exhibition team, and the invitation to have a retrospective evolved into an exhibition, the first solo exhibition of Miranda July, about her, focused on her performative works, which was very enlightening about the influence of her performative work in her cinema work. And yes, sorry, they told me to stop. I jump to, these are kind of some of the images. This is Pino Pascali, and this is Mariam Bennani. They just opened her exhibition, and for that the Fondazione Prada also produced a film that is kind of being screened in loop in the exhibition. It's a 60 minutes film, and this is kind of how the program look like. I finished, I promise. It's about kind of insisting on the idea that I've been kind of really fond of in the last 20 years of my work, of screening artist cinema within a bigger framework of cinema as a whole. So this is kind of the idea of the program at Fondazione Prada, is really kind of merging, melting artist cinema and treating it as cinema. Thank you.
Hello. My name is Lisa Long. I am a curator specializing in contemporary and time-based art, and I'm also the artistic director of the Julia Stoschek Foundation, where I have worked for the last 6.5 years. The first time I was at Loop, actually, I was presenting a program that I was just starting out with at the Julia Stoschek Foundation called Horizontal Vertigo. So here we are again. I'm very happy to be back. Thank you for the invitation. It's lovely, as always. The Julia Stoschek Foundation, for those of you who aren't so familiar, is a private foundation and collection. It was founded in 2007 by Julia Stoschek, and it specializes in time-based media art, so specifically film, video, performance, sound, and digital technologies. There are currently over 900 works in the collection. About 70% are actually moving image. The rest are also painting, photography, sculpture, installation. So it's really transdisciplinary or multidisciplinary in that sense. We have 2 exhibition spaces, one in Berlin and one in Düsseldorf, a total of 5,000 square meters of exhibition space. And we do thematic, large-scale thematic group exhibitions, often coming from the collection, but also including loans and newly commissioned works, as well as large-scale solo exhibitions, and then more dynamic programming of younger emerging artists and smaller solo presentations. My case study today is looking at an exhibition from 2021, actually got extended to 2022, I see, A Fire in My Belly. It was during COVID, so it was a tricky year, but I felt, or I'm speaking about this today because I felt it was one of the most successful kind of iterations or successful results of something that I'm going to be calling a sensual montage. So thinking about what it means to present moving image or time-based art in exhibition space. The show featured 47 artists, as you can see. 47 works by 36 artists from different generations, and it was looking at different experiences of violence and how these are witnessed, negotiated, and ultimately transformed and how artists deal with their own personal experiences of violence. So it was a very emotional show. It had a lot of moving work, and thinking about the path and the kind of sequence of how it unfolded was really important. I will start a video, and I'll just let it run. This is of the exhibition. Is it without sound or with sound? Can we turn the sound off of the video? Okay, thank you. So it took the film by David Wojnarowicz, A Fire in My Belly, as its starting point. The film is from 1987, and it was produced in shortly after Peter Hujar's death. There's some loud noise. Is that from? Okay. Do I have to push it again for it to start? Okay. Perfect. So it took the film, A Fire in My Belly, by David Wojnarowicz as its starting point to look at these different forms of experience of violence and how artists deal with them. The film, if you don't know it, is a very rapid sequence of snippets of documentary footage shot in Mexico, but also allegorical imagery that David Wojnarowicz made in his studio. And it had different iterations. It's an unfinished film, so there's a little bit of a contestation around which one is the original, if it has sound, if it doesn't have sound. These are some images from David Wojnarowicz's film. I think curating time-based art is really about finding the right balance between the space, the work, an atmosphere, the rhythm or flow, and how it unfolds sequentially. I really, really tried to think about the experience of the visitor. How are they going to move through the space? Obviously, it's multidimensional, but if we have a work that's very, very overpowering with a lot of sound, with a lot of light, is it important to give them a break? What kind of transition comes to the next work? Or do we want to bombard them again with another kind of very imposing experience? I'm using this terminology or this idea of a central montage because montage itself is a sequence, or it's selecting and editing together a sequence of images to create a type of emotional impact, to create a path, but one that we usually in film just see by sitting, right? And we kind of travel with the images as they unfold. Montage, I'm thinking particularly, of course, of early Russian cinema, or cinema theorists, Lev Kuleshov and Sergei Eisenstein, and they're used to or their discussions of montage as a way to transmit ideologies and also manipulate viewers' emotions. It's a very strong wording, of course, but something to think about, kind of creating an energy through sound and through rhythm. One moment, just a little sip. In 1937, Sergei Eisenstein wrote a text called Montage in Architecture, and this is what links it back to exhibition making for me. He talks about, I'm going to read a quote. When talking about cinema, the word path is not used by chance, he writes. That's the opening sentence. He continues to talk about how in cinema, as I said, we follow this kind of path, and we sit, and we're immobile, and we sit in a seat. And in exhibition making and in architecture, we move through a space. So for him, architectures like cathedrals or also the Acropolis were kind of ancient films that related to our embodied experience, that related to our movement. So that is something that I really think is interesting and also kind of a potent idea to think about curatorial practice because it brings together not only the images that we see and the sequence that they create and the content that they have, but also how we encounter them and our own emotions and our own experiences of them. So And he says, I'll read this. In the past, the opposite was the case. The spectator moved between a series of carefully disposed phenomena that he absorbed sequentially with his visual sense. The Greeks, this is also a quote, have left us with the most perfect example of shot design, change of shot, and shot length. Victor Hugo called the medieval cathedrals books in stone. The Acropolis of Athens has an equal right to be called the perfect example of the most ancient film. So I would like to leave you today with this idea of a sensual montage, of a sequence of experiences of phenomena that we encounter as we walk through spaces that kind of are triggered also by our movements and by our feelings and by the emotions that we carry within us, hence bringing in the sensual aspect of, a sensual montage. Thank you very much.
Okay. Good morning. It's a pleasure being with all of you here. Thank you for the invitation. It's, as I said, wonderful to be with so many colleagues and going back to amazing moments we spent together, but also moments of thinking. So I'm Andrea Lissoni. I'm working at Haus, which is a Bavarian publicly funded institution. I try to now to go through a compromise between a personal and institutional journey. First, I will answer two questions that you find in the booklet that Filipa shared with us very briefly, and then I will go through 3 stages that major preoccupation I've been working on in the last years through the program we set at Haus. So the first question is about the transformation of spectatorship and museum visiting habits and in the last decade. And yes, the question is they have been transformed a lot. They've been transforming a lot. And I will say that perhaps Claire Bishop, contradictory but always interesting way of rethinking the last periods by suggesting the importance of smartphones on the one hand that entered, so to say, the world landscape in the mid-2000s, and then the pandemic as 2 global events definitely have transformed the way of spectatorship and also the museum habits. So I will add to this that it's somehow wonderful to be in this panel, but obviously it's somehow narrowing because I cannot think about exhibiting moving images, and by moving images I mean what is shown in space and not in the museum, not in the film room, without producing, let's say, without commission, without having strong dialogues with artists throughout the years in particular. And the second question, Filipa, you raised and you shared with us was how technology of vision has transformed the way exhibition are conceived and conceptualized, and it's been an enormous quantum leap. Yes, of course, this happened. I think the first time I worked with Philippe Parrenaud on preparing the Turbine Hall Commission. We were already working with VR headsets and navigating throughout the space, the alteration of the space through a improved version of what is SketchUp, which is the tool everyone uses in the galleries. And to some extent, I keep thinking that the dialogues I have with Philippe and some peers, mostly using tools like the Apple Vision Pro system, are the ones that are setting finally the way to extending and stretching perception, which is one of my main major preoccupations. In that respect, I think there are 3 works, 3 VR works, the technology that seems somehow obsolete, that are extremely relevant, and one will be Tsai Min Liang, the second one will be the one by Stephanie Comilan, actually shown and produced at the Julia Stoschek Foundation, and the last one will be Conversation with the Sun by Apichapong Vastakur. Now, these are 3 pillars for me in understanding what's happening and where things are going in the landscape of moving images. I began this reflection, this journey that I try to articulate in 3 stages, with a project I made in 2018 or 19 at the Biennial of Moving Images in Geneva, where we invited artists like Mariam Beneni, Cora Kretalunduchai, Pandai Jing, Lorenzo Buhamdan, Tamara Henderson, Khalil Joseph, and also Lydia Lewis. And the idea, the title was The Sound of screens imploding. The idea was trying to focus on artists that were somehow transforming the parameter of fitting space or filling spaces with moving images, like by updating, upgrading their own way of working, by working and post-producing on site, by auto-sampling themselves, by giving so much room to sound, and by fragmenting spaces fragmenting screens throughout space, and last but not least, inserting a performativity condition. These were, for me, starting points. And then when I moved to Haus der Kunst, I began with stage one. Stage one was the survey exhibition of Fujiko Nakaya. The idea was to bridge within the space, and I think you can see this image, what back then was still called snow, the TV snow, no? the grain of electronics in form of fog, connected to her early practice as video maker that she developed from the very early 70s and throughout the mid and late 70s. So this apparition of natural water-driven fog throughout the galleries will generate this sort of idea of an entire landscape that is affected by this presence, that is bodily presence, and this watering presence, and this making somehow the space, the huge cavernous and big space into proper landscape. And the second stage was probably the artist that not only have been working for a long while, but the artist that somehow melted herself into landscape. And her name is John Jonas, you know her for sure, and transformed the way of screens, somehow the way of perceiving screens, but also we pushed the boundaries of something that was conceived for the cinema room, like this work called Winch in 1968, to become part of a landscape that will then be becoming the actual room, and then being in dialogue with the humans that were working through the rooms, as you can see in that image. I'm not talking so much about the works, we don't have no much time. Always in the first stage is a show that we closed recently, it's a by Rebecca Horn, where we pushed even more this idea of the whole room becoming a landscape and the center of the room becoming a stage, putting on the same level film she made for the camera, performing for the camera, in which often the relationship between body and landscape is at the center, on a big size, on a big dimension, as she never needed, as she always wanted, and she agreed on, and therefore giving the space this complete new form of transformation perception. The journey continued with going back to some roots and opening up to the idea what is an environment, therefore making a little survey show of dam type, the second Japanese generation following Fujiko Nakai, and therefore stressing the question, what is an environment? No? Today and how environment works. And I will say bodily perception has been always one of my main preoccupation. This was a show of Jacob Bissatte White made during the pandemic, where we made a survey of his work in a sort of club, in a silent club, huge silent club, somehow enabling the audience to have the public to have a direct relationship with images and his extraordinary game-changing imaginary. Same we did commissioning the first work of Christine Sukim with moving images, where the idea was instead to put a specific attention to the floor and what does it mean to engage with the floor, particularly with those that are not tall as me and that are younger than me, that are working on the floor and maybe walking their first steps on the floor and engaging with a new form or different form of language, new for the artist and new also for the relationship with how it's spoken, actually with words, and what these words can mean and represent. But this is just an example of this journey. The stage, so to say, 2 of this journey is the dissolution of borders and borders of perception. And what does it happen when you actually become a moving image within a landscape of moving images? This is a survey show by Tony Cox, curated by Emma Enderby, who is in the room with us. The idea was not only, it's in a bunker, the bunker of Haus der Kunst, not only to transform the gallery in a club. Electronic music is a major preoccupation for Tony, but actually to give, and I would have been extremely resistant to this idea, but then it became a click, to give to the public headsets, to walk through this array of words displayed throughout the space. Somehow this was first step into a journey that goes back to, Jeffrey Shaw, Visible City, late 80s, so The Child by Alex Gouffre, a video clip. But it was very important for us to have this journey through. Now I'm speeding up, skipping the whole question of environments and how environments and critical environments, and this is a beginning journey with Tony Cox, how critical environments are important and interesting and how they've been pioneering by fundamental artists. I move to stage 3, which is what we're doing now. At this point, what we're doing now is, I have to go back to the question of landscape and thinking how relevant was the work of John Jonas, the work of Anna Mendieta, particularly the silhouettes, the energy charge work, all the work she made, the tracks she made in space. How relevant is the work of Rebecca Hahn, and how relevant is the work of someone like Michael Snow? We're talking about the early 70s, and particularly, obviously, the machine that sees, Dela in La Région Centrale, to help me thinking about what is the real point of the landscape of the exhibition becoming a landscape and the public becoming an actor within this landscape, and therefore feedbacking, and not only watching it, but feedbacking the space of moving images, becoming a moving image themselves. So at the moment we're working with Philippa Ramos, Shuli Chang, and Cyprien Gaillard. Cyprien Gaillard, we were actually involved quite last minute in the commission of this work that is now in display in Torino at OGR. It's a 4D almost work on moving images becoming sculpture. The borders are dissolved, and we're working on a display of this work within a show that will possibly enhance as much as we can the bodily perception. With Shuli Chang, we're working on generating a landscape of what could be the idea of digital compost, and how her entire practice from analogic through electronic to digital will become a landscape, a survey landscape, like seen through the eye of AI, which is developing now in Berlin at the moment. And we are opening the show mid-February. With Philippe, we are doing something different. With Philippe, we are working on a film that is quite complicated to explain. Let's imagine it like a sort of Michael Snow push to the extreme image, or let's say dream. There's a landscape in a place. This landscape is light tracked. This live tracking gets into the space of the galleries at Haus Kunst, but the activation of this landscape, the actual landscape that produces the images within Haus Kunst, that is conceived as an entire landscape, comes through the voice of two dancers that move into the space and speak as if they were the public to this screen, and this discourse affects both the landscape abroad and what's happening in the big screen and in the space of the galleries. Not simple to explain, but in the end, those that will enter these galleries will probably feel themselves part of a sort of strange video game in which someone is talking to you, talking to the machines, and talking to a landscape, and becoming a landscape. So this is stage 3. I am looking forward to say something more maybe poignant and understandable when I will be able to to share stage 4. Thank you so much for your attention.
Thank you so much. It's yesterday Gabriele Brantes, much quoted, much seen with long and short hair here, said something that was a little bit a punch in the stomach, which is that he made he observed that less than 1%, that in Art Basel the works of moving image-based works are less than 1% of the whole sales, and at the same time what we see here is that doesn't reflect the way in which art institutions are exhibiting and collaborating and supporting artists who work with film, with video, and who create installations and environments. And I think this is very rewarding and, of course, gives sense to what we do here as Loop as a whole. No? And thinking about this and the importance that moving image time-based works have in institutional contexts, and grabbing, Andrea, what you were saying in relation to the exhibition or a work as a landscape, which is a very interesting concept. But the landscape is also a space, well, it's also a relationship of perception, and is a space that we have to be in and out. In order to see a landscape, we have to be detached from it, and what does it mean to be inside a landscape? Is it still a landscape, or are we part of it, no? And this led me to think about the overuse, and I'm grateful that it hasn't been mentioned here, of the notion of immersiveness. No, and there's a proliferation of immersive experiences, Van Gogh in 3D, museums who claim that they do immersive experiences. There's just recently in Switzerland in the Aargauer Kunsthalle, there's a very complex exhibition by an artist who is extremely brainy and works thinking technology in a very complex way, called Pauline Juliet. And the description for attracting visitors, for sure, is that it's an immersive experience. If you go there with that experience, you have a huge disappointment. But so I would like to ask about this relationship between the installation and the exhibition of works that become environments and have this nature, this quality of making landscape or being landscape, and also how to respond and how to assure that the complexity and the depth of these works remain considered and attended to, while also knowing how maybe visitors' experiences are changing, and therefore institutions need to provide either the experience of immersiveness or their promise. No? And I don't know, Andrea, if you want to start from there, since you were...
Yes.
Or...
Well, very briefly, I can say it's a conclusion. An open conclusion. It's not even a question. I think if you work in an institution, you have the luxury of basically, every institution is local, training, I will say, your public, no? And training, I mean almost like as if it was a basketball team, no? This building and making together, literally together with the public, the program, and generating form of resonance and echoing throughout, across galleries and across the program throughout time, generates, I hope, this transformation of perception that we were mentioning. And about the general scene, where who is going where, and how we learn from what Julian, you were saying, that roots have been opened a long time ago. I've been mentioning Anna Mendieta and Michael Snow, and so there has been always some, say, some trailers that opened this conversation. I think it's fundamental. Although I remember it was a critical point yesterday in the conversation about pushing boundaries and not imposing curatorial view. But if you're so lucky to continue conversation, you really can push boundaries with younger or with artists in general, and therefore going into this direction that I now call, let's say, landscape, a quantum landscape. I don't want to call it any more digital landscape. Going back probably to Giorgione, you know, this moment of the storm when you have like a person in the first two lines, you know, a woman, a man, a lighting in the back, and you don't understand what the relationship is between them and what's happening in the background. But this, in fact, is a perfect representation of the landscape, you know, and what the landscape is. And I'm using this category because I'm particularly interested in it. I have the impression this is the direction where most artists I'm curious about are going. You know? Gabriela Brante's last show in Gulbenkian is basically about also this, and how you perceive yourself mirrored, I guess, into the potential character he stages as Ghost. Not only because what they say, but also the way they are displayed in space. No, you just have a physical relationship with them in the landscape he shows in each individual work that compose that new landscape, which is the exhibition, is a catastrophic ecological landscape, ecologically affected landscape that shows a direction. No? So I guess that's not a coincidence why Paolo, you're showing Gabriela Brantes in so many years, because he is someone who is like really pushing boundaries. So it's good. This is happening. It should go. It should continue. No? So it's not an answer. It's just a way to say what are our directions now in working and where we can go.
Maybe I may add something as a hardcore advocate of the film theater, which has to me kind of inner immersive qualities. In the sense it's kind of differently from black or white boxes, whatever. It's kind of it's really made to make you forget about your body by kind of how comfortable the seats are, complete darkness or kind of very seriously taken darkness, and having the screen as only horizon. So kind of these are kind of the landscape you are supposed to be immersed in. So I really think that the film theater is kind of has not said the last word in terms of immersiveness.
I wanted to add, I'm not so afraid of the idea of immersiveness, to be honest. I think that there's a lot of potential and that's why it's shown more and more in more professional and engaging ways within museums, is that people are looking for ways to connect to art. And museums, unfortunately, for a very long time have done that in a very particular way, and it's not evolving quickly. Display hasn't changed in big museums for over 50, 60, 70 years. And our world is rapidly changing, and our technologies are rapidly changing. And how we experience the city, how we experience our movements, how we experience the flow between the digital and the non-digital is not reflected in our museum experiences, usually. So for audiences to go to these big immersive shows about a historical artist is maybe an attempt to get to know art through a different way of entry point, because that entry point isn't being given. So I think it's time to really embrace how, especially moving image, but also, I don't know, we were talking a couple of weeks ago about this idea of variable media, right? Of like all of these kind of experiences that relate to us because and embracing things that are more multisensorial, because we do feel, we touch, we taste, we smell, we hurt, we're tired, and these spaces don't reflect that. So for example, within exhibition spaces, I like the idea of landscape a lot. I think this idea of coming and going is really beautiful. It also gives agency. It's something in this idea of like a central montage, also just movement is a very big part of it. But again, even just simple things like seating or knowing that you will be able to sit is something that keeps audiences away. Or for example, at the Julia Stoschek Foundation, people come and spend more time, because they know they're going to be seeing art that takes time. So they're already prepared. The expectation is set. So I think there's work to do. And I also think that, the kind of the mixing of different technologies, especially things like VR and XR, and what that means of how we engage with space, how we engage with artworks is, it's flourish. It's going to change even more, and it's going to flourish in a way.
There is something connecting to this, since we brought us to different technologies, Julia and Lisa. Why? I saw Julia just before, and that made me wonder about, Julian, the way you were presenting this exhibition of this historical Japanese works, which is many of us were like, wow, and which concerns the exhibition, but also rendering, translation, and potential adaptation of works that rely on certain technologies that, as you mentioned, some works had to be shown on video, for instance. And I would like to ask about the institutional or even curatorial legitimacy to do this, to change formats. We would never have a painting that is on oil and then make it as a digital print, for instance. But we allow ourselves to do this with a work that was shot and meant to be exhibited on film, and then we have to exhibit it digitally, for different reasons. And it's always complex, but sometimes it's extremely necessary. And I know that at least some of you here have quite some experience about what it means to exhibit the work and change formats, and how this matters or not for audiences to have the perception of, let's say, the travels that these works can do in terms of technological support.
Yeah, absolutely. It was a difficult question for us. I mean, in previous iterations of collaborative cataloging Japan's projects, we really committed to 16 millimeter film looped and things like that. But that meant we weren't able to preserve many other works because of that commitment that we made. So for us, at least, we're finding a balance. If we choose digital for some things, that means that we are able to work on more preservation projects, and that meant more works would survive the age. So I'm not saying it was perfect, but I think we were already presenting multiple adaptations. These works were performances, one-off. So we're presenting them as installations looped. They were in discotheques, so they're projected in different environments. It's really difficult to create a discotheque environment. Impossible as well, really. It's really of its time. So, yeah, I think for us at least, what's important is we try our best to approximate that experience, but also communicate through wall text, through our research materials, what decisions we made and why, and what was possible, how it was presented in these various iterations, and how that was variable versus what it is now. That communication became what's most important. But I want to also respond to the kind of first round of discussions. As a film festival programmer that often invited artists working in museum gallery spaces with film and video to the cinema space. I think when I was just starting 10 years ago, it was an easy invitation. Hey, we have amazing equipment in the cinema space, concentrated audience, great sound, great projection. You don't have that in gallery spaces with these monitors. This is something different. But over the years, I think that's become very complicated. Museums have taken up moving image projection very seriously. I've seen 4K projection in like the Venice Biennale 2017, Joe Tao, committing to this idea of quality with projection and creating a space for immersion, or at least focus that I thought was very special to cinema. So that's become more complicated because I think of technological reasons and advances, and it's been for me an exciting way to rethink what really cinema can offer in this whole proliferation of media and dialogues between all these spaces. What is it? Is cinema special actually? And I think, Paolo, you think it is, and I think so too. But I think it is important to re-question and not rely too much on its history, and think about what it means also to, have these people locked in their seats. That's kind of too much maybe for some media experiences, right? It's an ongoing conversation, and one that I at least try to revisit very frequently, to really think about what we are offering in the cinema that's maybe not possible in other spaces, or less possible in other spaces. Yeah.
In relation to that, and the reason why also asking this question is because we're in Loop, and it's a question that also I imagine collectors ask themselves. Like, I'm incorporating a work in my collection. how is this work going to age? How can it still be relevant in 20 years, or how can I still watch it in 20 years? You know? And if we're thinking how 16 millimeter will be translated to a file, maybe we will have to start thinking about how a file becomes something else. No, so this also matters, and of course, it's something we also discuss in the next panel, which is about criteria for collecting and incorporating works that are time-based media. And before opening questions to our audience, I had a question that concerned, well, both Paolo and Julian, in your closer relationship to the movie theater, but also Lisa and Andrea, which you touch upon very briefly, Andrea, but which concerns the changes of viewership that have been happening. And yesterday I said that I matured professionally growing up with discussions about the death of cinema that seems immortal despite its history that is permanently signed by death treats. No? But indeed, following 2020 and the proliferation of screens in our pockets and in our beds and everywhere, there have been changes to spectatorship, to viewership, and there are some remarkable case studies. Battaglia yesterday was one. Paolo with the Godard cinema, you're also showing that actually very specific spaces for cinema manage to rediscover a love for the cinematic as a whole. No, but I just wanted to ask you for your account on how institutions programming are relating to audiences and to changes in viewership habits.
Julian, want to start?
You go ahead.
Well, yeah, I don't know. I mean, I'm constantly questioned as well, in the sense that I can only testify of this kind of happy evolution. I would say I can watch in a couple of theaters I direct is really kind of when the program is curated, it kind of proposes some original take and view on contemporary cinema and less contemporary cinema. I mean, it attracts kind of a younger generation audience that is really heartwarming. I don't know, and if I really kind of question if this is some kind of movement that follow the coming back of vinyls when it comes to music, but I don't think it's that, because it's kind of it's really something else. It doesn't involve any object or kind of any fetishism. It's really being part of discourse instead of being consumers, which is kind of a tricky thing when it comes to cinema and this double nature of art and industry and heavy industry in most of the cases. So it's really kind of interpreting the way of exhibiting cinema and treating this venue in a very different way. So not selling a product, but proposing a discourse in which the audience is invited. And I think that these needs kind of are, for me, are real, and I can sense how much the younger generation adhere. I mean, it's sensitive to this approach in film curating.
Okay, I'll go. Yeah, sure. Yeah, I've been thinking about scale, just like what I was saying, what cinema offers, the size of the screen. But, many artists like Tassi Tadin, for example, prefer like a smaller scale, a more intimate scale, and that kind of relationship that one can, bring out through, having a small projection and having this intimate relationship. Some of those are the questions I ask. Is it really better if it's bigger, louder, etc.? And I think one thing I guess cinema offers, in my mind, is this sense of community. I love this idea of a basketball team that you're kind of training and working with the audience. It's really this kind of dialogue that takes place with the audience over time. That's really why I wanted to commit to working to in an institution where I can kind of work year-round rather than as an independent curator as I was before, dropping in for a little bit and then going to another space, you know. That's what I'm interested in exploring now, and I have the privilege of working in a space where we, you know, work with VR, exhibition, but also collections, so films from 120 years ago that are, you know, being archived and presented to a public today. It's like a real, whole ecology of media coexisting in dialogue in one space, and that was also another thing that attracted me. It's not just a cinema space I'm working in. I'm within a building or an institution where all those possibilities are being explored together, and that's what attracted me to working at I, for example. I think I'd rather hear you, the two of you, speak to this topic more now.
I think it's important to have both experiences of having a cinema. I mean, I love going to the cinema. I've never seen the Prada one open. I'm coming for that. Yeah. It sounds incredible. And it takes me into a different space. And being in an exhibition space and thinking about an exhibition space and how is just a different thought process, I think, and a different approach to, how we, to the audience. So I don't think it's one or the other, for sure. It's a mix of everything. And as technologies evolve, it will kind of become more and more porous. So, for example, right now we're showing a work in Berlin by Simon Speiser and Norbert Papa. It's an XR, so an extended reality piece. You put on a headset, but you can actually see through the headset. You don't actually see through the headset. The headset records the surroundings and gives it back to you, but you feel like you're seeing your surroundings in real time. So it enables you to move around the space, and it enables you to interact with others. And they've conceptualized it a little bit as a choreographic notation, because once you've calibrated the headset, narratives and a world of stones, a natural world appears, also again a landscape in a way, and you can interact with them and you touch them and they move or they disappear, and depending on where you go, certain narratives will be triggered and they'll take you through different kind of reflections on certain types of spirituality or kind of multi-dimensional ways of being. So it's a really beautiful piece that brings a lot of different types of experiences together, because we always thought, or for a long time, VR, for example, was so singular, very opposite in a way of cinema, because you had to really you couldn't move or you had to be projected, and now this is opening that up. So again, there's that porosity to it, but it's still a very different experience than being in a cinema, and I think we need both. Yeah.
There is, agreeing with everything you say, there is one point that to me it's extremely precious or important, and you must have seen I didn't show any black box, no, or white cube, is that whilst I'm absolutely for extending the life of the experience in the film room, we are really committed to get out from one of the worst legacy of the modernity, which is actually affecting also our critical approach to modernity, which is, for instance, all the paratext apparatuses. How do you read, no? And how are you forced to read, right? So I'm pushing the boundaries. We're pushing the boundaries of bodily perception, mostly because I'm convinced that walking around walls as if we were ants and reading to double check is something that we inherited from, in museums, particularly in art centers, from a century that wants now, or we want to somehow not only criticize but also undo, and still we can't. Because still we're using wall text, still we're using labels, still we're using like politics speaking at the beginning, still we're using all these rhetorics that are the ones that are really hard to take down, right? Or to criticize. So that's, I think, the reason why it's so important to welcome, acknowledge, and support artists that are pushing these boundaries, because they're also helping us to take out these apparently invisible labels. But in fact, these labels are directing not only our gaze, but also our let's say, habits that are the most dangerous to pull out. So throughout moving images and that pushing forward what moving images are in galleries and performativity, I guess we have the opportunity to to like literally making the world soft, but also enabling not to read horizontally in a language that is known, but to perceive, let's say, polysensorily other languages, no? So that's my note.
This tension between understanding, feeling, comprehending information that institutions always try to juggle. No, it's something that we could spend here other hours discussing. I'm aware of time. I'm going to open in case there's some questions or comments from the audience. There's a microphone circulating. Leonardo.
Yeah, thank you for this thoughtful and a lot of food for thoughts in this presentation. I wanted to add something that I think bridges a lot of the conversation that we had, and I want to thank Paolo for showing your path, because it kind of reminded me how recent it is that, you know, a systematic understanding of artists' moving images has been incorporated into film programming in festivals. And what I'm observing now, especially in new generations, is actually an understanding of the qualities, the intrinsic qualities of these two spaces, so the cinema and the exhibition space, and how this is actually informing the single work. I will make an example of this, which is a work that I commissioned and produced, Anna Watts, A Noche in America. So the way she thought about the work for an exhibition space is a 3-channel installation with a duration of around 40 minutes, and an editing that kind of really is edited as chapters. So thinking that the attention span in an exhibition space might be lower, but the bodily experience of, you know, being immersed in 3-channel installation is something extremely perceptual, extremely, so it's less narrative, is a lot more visually rich. Then she re-edited the material in a feature film of 63 minutes, which ended up being in competition in Locarno and traveled to many different festivals. So what I'm interested in right now is actually to see artists that are not simply navigating with their work in different ways, the two spaces, but actually thinking how the same research, the same body of research can generate a work that opens up new possibilities and fluid possibilities between the two spaces. I think, and I was wondering if you agree, that this will be a very interesting future development of our field.
Yeah.
I would say yes. I mean, as a collecting foundation, we talk to our artists about having different modules, not only of display when making like acquisition packages, but also going into the film circuit with a single channel. Obviously, you can't do that with a multiple channel installation. And then using different types of distributions. So galleries, offer different types of work than, let's say, VDP or EAI. And many artists, and I think more and more artists are doing both. And I think it's very smart, and I encourage artists to look into that kind of dispersed model, definitely.
For sure.
Absolutely, I'm excited by it too. I agree. And it's exciting for me, at least, as somebody who's been researching, expanded cinema in the 1960s, where there's multiple iterations, thinking about how that is happening now, like a 3-channel version of a work and also a cinema version, that can coexist. I know that complicates things in the art market and in collections and things like that, but it is inviting us to rethink the possibilities of moving image, collecting, production, etc., exhibitions. So for me, it's an exciting development that artists have in mind cinema as one possibility for their work to thrive and exist and meet other audiences. So I'm excited by that.
I'm also very convinced that this kind of this double approach has a lot of potential when kind of given the time and thought. And the first time I think I had this kind of very intense experience was with the Jean-Luc Godard Livre d'Images installation that I first experience in film and has this kind of Jean-Luc kind of approach, so telling you what's right and wrong, basically. And in the installation, for example, that took place in the Neon Castle in 2020, organized by Vision du Réel and Émilie Bugès, it was kind of a radically different experience, kind of much sweeter and welcoming and totally different. The 3D kind of immersive experience of the film was a rather different kind of discourse. So it really kind of depends a lot, like Anna Batz did, this kind of how much thought is given to the installation potential compared to the single screen kind of experience.
Of course. I would just add something, Leonardo, in relation to what you say, which is also how the transformation of the same object also allows for different experiences. Recently, I had the chance of screening Anna Vass's A Noite in America that you had produced and commissioned and exhibited in the Cinema Lumière in Paris. And all of a sudden, elements that I hadn't seen become visible, and experiences that often we associate with an exhibition as that of, there's a moment of this waterfall that is long, and suddenly this transforms the relationship to the cinema, especially in a more classical cinema that is tendentially showing narrative films, to just create an experience of suspension and observation that bridges the space of art and the space of cinema. And something very special happens when a museum doesn't become a cinema and a cinema doesn't become a museum, but they open themselves to different viewership possibilities. No?
And I really think this idea of opening up and making things porous and like pushing the boundaries out is, and even in distribution formats, in the way art is sold, the way it's kind of circulated, that's the exciting thing about time-based art and about, I guess that's what I call it, but that and it's in a way very unique, and artists have the chance to create different versions of something that will allow different insights, and as you say, different things come into focus. Sometimes it can maybe be a little bit hard to grasp, but how exciting. Like, it's much more interesting than just, being kind of confronted with something that's always trying to be the same. Or I feel like we're always constantly changing, so why not the art as well?
I'm doing something that I did yesterday and terrified audience, but last question, or we close, because we don't have a lot of time. We're staying here. We have, there's social space also to meet and ask direct questions to each person in the panel. But I wonder if there's a question that has urgent need to be answered. There's one there.
I'll do it quick because we want to have a break, but and I think it's a continuation of what Leonardo mentioned. I think a part of this discourse of like this double, let's say, environment that we are thinking, the black box, white box, I think a part of the conversation that I think I'm missing, it's also like the discourse that comes within each environment. Let's say, as an artist showing, let's say with white box, you're like confronted with like more the art scene people, let's say crowd, that is a specific discourse, and when you show it in the black box, it becomes very cinematic. So I think, I don't know if you have anything to say and elaborate on this, about like this form of like discourse and how to navigate those.
I'm trying to think of moments where it really didn't work because of those reasons you just described, this translation of a work that existed for many years in, let's say, the white cube context, and you bring it to the cinema, or vice versa. I just don't have one at the moment. Maybe somebody can help here, where it really didn't work. But yeah.
I mean, I think, for example, one of the reasons why Julia Stoschek started her foundation and also dedicated her her time and her means to showing it publicly is that she was frustrated with seeing, moving image in museums in the little box, like in the corner or behind a curtain somewhere, and wanted to create an experience that was more welcoming of just moving through space as we do and being confronted with this media. So that, about the discourses, obviously they're very different. They have different, violent histories to a certain extent, and they sometimes overlap and sometimes they don't. And again, I think the artist, it's a moment where the artist can step in and really think about what the space, how the space is connoted and how to deal with that. And it's sometimes a very interesting and fruitful conversation between curators and artists of how to kind of incorporate those discourses and histories. And it just, again, is site-specific in the sense of how is the work going to be here? What are the, what's possible, what's not possible? Did that sort of answer your question, or? Yeah.
I have one quick thing to add, actually. I think maybe artists who are used to working in a non-cinema context, what often I find is that there's some, maybe it's too much reliance on a wall text or an explanation of a work that makes it very difficult to translate into a cinema experience where, it's a black box, so there's no wall text giving you those, thematic or hooks that, are on the wall text. So that might be one thing that I always keep in mind when presenting in a cinema context. Even if I really love a work, would this really work without that information? Or how can we provide that information in a way that feels natural and not so intrusive to the cinema experience? So I don't have a specific work in mind that didn't work, but that's something I've come across often, actually. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you all. We're running 15 minutes late, so we will start at 11:45 with our last panel on collecting. Do join us and do enjoy the coffee outside. And thank you very much, Julian.